with a patient, so she will be jumping on. But when we've got a few more people on, we'll hit record and we will go. If you have any specific, how negative experience it can be, in the respect that I think it's interesting, when I spoke to a Swiss endocrinologist who told me that, fascinatingly, and I've seen a lot of research on this as well, is that women are experiencing the menopause and perimenopause much earlier than our mothers did. And this is largely because of the impact of stress and certain hormones on our body. And it's quite fascinating, as they said years ago, women didn't really suffer as much as we are doing now. And this is what Dr. Wendy and I really wanted to highlight today, is just to be really real about this, because women can suffer quite significant changes, both physiological changes and neurological changes, as in changes to focus, changes to, just simple forgetfulness, brain fog, just very, as people say, they can barely think straight in the mornings. And mood changes, really significant mood changes. Anxiety in particular is one of the areas that I see an awful lot of change. We know that 50% of women suffer from arthralgia, which is basically more an increase in pain. So this is why, again, what with menopause and with ketones, it's fascinating. One of the areas of pain where there is a definite increase is actually the area of migraine headaches. And as Gavin knows, is also on the call, Dr. Eleanor Gross in Switzerland, she's been doing a huge amount of research with ketones and migraines. But ketones play a really beneficial role in quite a lot of areas that women experience. So if we look at some of the basic areas, most women suffer from a change in sleep patterns. They suffer from a change, as I said earlier, in focus and concentration. They suffer from changes in mood. Depression and anxiety are very, very common with the menopause. Pain, increased pain level is another area that we see a significant increase. And also we have a problem where, this is cumulative. It doesn't just suddenly happen overnight. And going back to what the Swiss endocrinologist said, with our stress levels being so much higher, and with our what we experience now in the world of the chemical overload that we're exposed to, all of these factors just impact on our liver as well, and detoxification of the female hormones, and also have an impact on our bowel as well, and the microbiome. So some of the things I've been looking at today as well is just some really exciting new research. So last year, Wendy and I both attended the Functional Medicine Institute conference in London with Dr. Jeff Bland. And it was nothing to do with ketones or the ketogenic diet, but actually he brought up in there the emerging research of ketones actually enhancing what we call the microbiome. And the microbiome is basically the gut, and improving the quality of the gut. And also in this time as well, when we are facing, an immune system crisis, should we say, with the current times we're going through. I won't mention any names, but again, 95% of your immune system is actually located in the gut. Serotonin, the neurotransmitter, is also manufactured in the gut. So it's really significant that we have our gut as strong as possible. And I said, new research from the University of San Francisco, California, has also shown how ketone bodies can positively affect, again, the microbiome, the gut. And also quite significantly, they're looking again, as the ketogenic diet has been seen as a signaling molecule affecting inflammation, they're also finding it's dropping a marker in the bowel, which is connected to inflammatory disorders, which even go on. So in functional medicine, any form of autoimmune disease, which is actually quite common nowadays, is preceded by an area of inflammation. So the more we can lower our inflammatory markers in the body and inflammation, the better we will be. And that's why, as the ketogenic naturopath, I'm hugely interested in all aspects of ketogenic living. So that includes ketones, ketones from MCT, exogenous ketones, which are the ketones we're drinking, the ketogenic diet, low carbohydrate diet, but I'm still a huge fan of a ketogenic diet. I do feel it's really significant that to work with ketones and a ketogenic diet, you get better results again, because you're increasing the blood levels of the ketones to a more therapeutic level in the body. So these were some of the areas I wanted to sort of briefly discuss. We've talked about sleep before, so I'm not going to go over sleep again. One of the exciting things, we spoke with the wonderful Dustin Schaefer the other day in America, and we were talking about with insulin resistance. This is another huge area when women have hormonal difficulties, as any woman can attest to. It's rather like Kevin, when Kevin becomes a teenager overnight, it suddenly can be as literal as a switch going off in the body, where suddenly everything changes. And I've known super healthy women who are sort of celebrity yoga instructors suddenly saying literally they developed a muffin top overnight that nothing could get rid of. So as women, this is an area I've had a lot of emails for saying, please cover, you know, the stubborn weight loss side. And this is where ketones in particular, ketones are just really important to bring in to, as I said, to lower inflammation, to aid with sleep and what's known as the GABA to glutamate rate. But our body is more powerful when we have more therapeutically raised ketones in the body to also burn fat. So we have to hack into the body more. So following the traditional Western diet no longer will cut it. It's really important that we look at ways we lower our blood sugar and lower our insulin levels. And we know also through the ketogenic diet, we can achieve this by having raised ketones in the body. So that's one really important area. Fasting and bringing in different forms of fasting hacks, be it one meal a day, be it the 16-8, be it simply, if you're just starting, just a window of 12 hours of eating and 12 hours of not eating can be really significant. But on the exercise front, Dustin gave a really great hack, which I want to share if you didn't hear that. And that was simply that most women and guys fast overnight. That's a natural time. And that's why breakfast, if you look at the word breakfast, is literally break fast. So if you can do a minimum of a 12-hour window where you just have water, and what you do is walk at a good pace in the morning, for, if possible, for an hour. So it's a good amount of cardiovascular. As you said, don't get to the point that you can't speak, but enough that you're out of breath. And then you would have your ketones after that period of time. And as I discussed the other day on the call, this also increases the uptake of the ketones that you're actually drinking. And it's all to do with something called the MCT transporter, which is an MCT oil. It's nothing to do with that. But very simply, just imagine that as you exercise, if you take your ketones after, they're uptaken more efficiently, not only in the body, but also in the brain. And some of the new research as well with the brain is showing that the higher the level of ketones in the blood, and what I mean is a therapeutic level of what's known between 2 to 4 millimoles. Now, the ketone nat drinks you have raise the blood level about 0.5. Okay, so you're in no danger of going anywhere near ketoacidosis level, which is north of 15 to 25. Okay, so that's, again, really significant. By raising the ketone levels in the blood, it increases the uptake by the brain. And we know now, our research, more and more research is showing that actually the brain prefers ketones as a fuel source, and that they feed the neurons more efficiently, especially when you're over the age of 30, especially when you're insulin resistant, i.e. menopausal. So these things are really critical to ensure that we get our ketones higher. And those of you who haven't been on the calls before, getting ketones high, as I said earlier, can be through the ketogenic diet and reducing your carbohydrate level to about 20 grams a day, through fasting, through MCT oil, which generates your body's own ketones, as does fasting and as does the ketogenic diet, or through now the drinking of exogenous ketones. And we have what's known as the BHB, the butyrhydroxybutyrate salt version, which is a very gentle version on the body. The other more pharmaceutical version does elevate in a sort of more powerful way, should we say. But this is why the ketones are really, really significant. And I certainly notice when I look at patients in clinic, and myself as well, you know, I literally did crash into the menopause. And as I said, it is very debilitating. And especially when I work with women with mental health problems, they often say to me, if only I had something visible like a broken leg, people would know I'm struggling. And I think that's a really important thing to bring across, is that nowadays a lot of women are struggling, which is a so-called natural process. But I think biologically, because our body are going through so many unnatural processes, it's quite complicated and is creating a lot of symptoms and discomfort in women. So the more we can find ways and hacks to support our journey through this, it's really significant. And the other thing is, like I've talked about in this time where we can't take our health for granted in this current climate, I would also say to women, be more gentle on yourself at this particular period of your life. It is a period where we do need to nurture more. You do need to listen to the body more. Driving yourself hard, you know, even with exercise, people can sometimes over-exercise, you know, worried about weight, thinking, well, you know, at least I'll lose weight if I just push myself harder. Actually, sometimes it can have a negative effect. So as I said earlier, just cardiovascular is good. Before you take your ketones, bring in some bone supporting exercise. But remember that actually too much exercise and too high a degree of exercise actually is a stress on the body, which raises our stress hormone cortisol, which is actually something we need to be able to keep low, or as low as possible during these times. So even exercises like taking time out, being in nature, breathing, salt baths in the evening. Salt's an incredible thing. Salt is necessary, the sea salt, nothing like the Naxos salt or Saxo salt, whatever it's called. Sea salt is really necessary to balance the electrolytes, and many sort of variants of sea salts have up to 82 different minerals in them. So what I tend to do with sea salt actually is have a whole plethora in my cupboard. So I have everything from British sea salts like Cornish and Maldon. I have the French sel de Guérande, which is very rich in magnesium. It's the very dirty grey. You've got the Himalayan pink salt, and even rock salt. So I have different forms of salt from different parts of different climates, different environments, because they all have a different mineral balance. So it's really important to keep taking the salt in your water and salt in your food as well. And the other thing is obviously hydrating through this time, really significant, because if people put weight on, and sometimes it is obviously fluid weight, women are actually quite concerned that if they drink fluid, they will be putting more fluid weight on the body, whereas actually it's really critical, especially if you're following a ketogenic diet, and especially if you're taking ketones, you know, to really ensure that you have salt and lots of pure water in your diet, just to keep flushing through. And another wee hack actually on that front, purely as a naturopath speaking, I often see people drinking water with meals, or even drinking ketones with meals. And what I would say on that is any form of fluid before a meal or after a meal. So when I worked at the Viva Mayer clinic in Austria, they had a very strict regime of half an hour before a meal. That was it, no fluid at all. until you've had your meal, and then an hour after your meal, because you can be diluting your digestive enzymes. So it's really important on that front to, I feel, choose the right time to drink your water. Just trying to think of other things any questions in particular? Well, another big thing that I got questions of, obviously, was energy levels. Women get a crash in their energy levels with menopause and perimenopause. And I'm sure many of you know, you've heard me talking about this before, but ketones are known as the fourth macronutrient, and they are a superior fuel source for the body, and they increase our ATP, which is sort of like an energy source, by over 30% in comparison to glucose. So again, to me, the more a woman can actually sort of bring some fasting in, be more aware of a low carb ketogenic diet, and bring in drinking forms of ketones such as MCT oil and exogenous ketones, the better we will be, because again, we're going to activate and allow the body to have this superior fuel source as your energy source. As I'll just keep talking, another thing I will go into is one of the criticisms about the ketogenic diet, and actually about ketones, is that it can be acid forming, and I agree to a certain extent with that. It can be acid forming. This is where the ketones come into their own, because we know that ketones, one of the incredible other aspects or benefits of ketones, which they're researching a lot at the moment, is they are a cell signaling molecule. Okay, and so the important thing when we look at the cell, I've totally forgotten what I'm saying, Gavin. Sorry, waffling away myself. Can anyone speak up?
Yeah, Jen, you were talking about how ketones working as a signaling molecule.
Yes, I know I was, and I can't remember why I went. Anyway, never mind. But the important thing is, we know they are a cell signaling molecule in the body. But one of the things that we've also been aware of is, as I said, the acid nature of ketones and of a ketogenic diet. And normally, if you follow a healthy ketogenic diet, but bring a lot of carbohydrate vegetables in, or even low carbohydrate vegetables, those people who are more insulin resistant or just stuck and can't lose weight or feel very, very sort of bloated, you can't move them out of that particular phase. You can't move them. You can't move them forward. I'm having a brain meltdown today. I haven't had enough ketones. Anyway, so the significant thing about the ketones and drinking the ketones is that you can still have an alkaline green ketogenic diet in every single day, which would technically take you out of ketosis, because you would be going over your 20 net grams of carbohydrates. Okay, but then when you're drinking your ketones, the ketones again will elevate your blood level of ketones and keep you in that state of ketosis, which is really significant. And the other thing again is they've found with the cell signaling aspect it still switches on in the presence of carbohydrates. So this is how now we can really begin to tailor make ketogenic programs for all manner of sort of diseases and just life changes that we're going through, to actually get the optimum program for each individual person. So I think that's a really important thing to say. I'm aware it's 20 past and dear Dr. Wendy hasn't been able to jump on yet. Any questions? I can just see a few if I can read.
Do you think, hi Jen, it's Claire.
Hi Claire, yeah, I can't read the questions very well. Sorry,
no.
Yes.
I was just going to ask about whether ketones will actually help balance the female hormones themselves, or whether they are kind of used in addition to things that help balance the female hormones.
It's a great question. I think how it works is, as you well know, Claire, being a naturopath, is because hormones all interact together. It's like an orchestra all working together. And I think one of the significant areas where we see hormones affecting, or the ketones affecting female hormones, albeit not directly, is through, again, the lowering of cortisol, and also most significantly the lowering of insulin, because insulin is this driver for inflammation as well in the body. So the more we can lower that, that seems to be what's having the benefit on female hormones, because those tend to be raised, they tend to be elevated in the menopause. And they are the things that, in particular, research is showing through the ketogenic diet. And remember, obviously, exogenous ketones, they're a very new super fuel. So there's a lot of research and actually going on at the moment. And I think the exciting thing is that we're in a position to almost drive the research forward. So any of my patients, I check parameters of sleep, of energy, of brain fog, of mood, all these kind of categories, to see what they're suffering at any given time, and that may include in the menopause. And then with the bringing in of the ketones, and sometimes initially I just bring ketones in before making dietary changes, you then can really monitor the changes that go on. And it's a shame Dr. Wendy hasn't come on.
Well, she's just joined, actually, Jen.
I'm here, Jen.
I was talking about bloods. The astonishing thing you had with your bloods, with just testing ketones alone.
Yes. Oh, okay. Yes, that's a good point to come in. I've been trying to rejoin, but I'm not very technical, so I had to rejoin on the computer. So I sort of test everything that I do. I don't kind of take anything on face value, because obviously people are expecting me to have, some level of looking into things. And so when I've actually been taking the ketones myself since last July, and what I noticed at first was that I had a lot more energy. That was what I noticed, and it woke my brain up. So that was enough to keep me taking the ketones. It was, I have quite a busy life. I have 3 kids. I have a busy professional life, and to have something that woke me up and sustained my brain longer than a cup of coffee did was a miracle for me, actually. I was like, right, I'll be taking those. And I might take another one in the afternoon without the caffeine, just to sustain my energy, instead of reaching for a chocolate bar or a healthier snack. Often it wasn't a chocolate bar, being a bit tough on myself. But even so, I found that this was something that woke me up. So I was doing this for about 3 months, and I had already done bloods before I did this. And I thought, well, let me just, it's on the packet, it says that it lowers your blood sugar. And I was struggling with that a little bit on a personal level, because I was finding the drinks were quite sweet. I feel like they, in some ways, have been set to the American market. So I was thinking, how can this really work with this very sweet drink, and then how can it really lower my blood sugar? And sure enough, I did my hemoglobin A1C before I started, and I did it 3 months later, and I was really pleased to see it had dropped. It had dropped from, I think it was creeping up there, it was about 5.7, 5.8, and it dropped down to 5.5, which is where I needed it to be. And that was my first sort of interest in the ketones, was really to see what a difference it made to me. It gave me energy, it gave me good mood, it gave me at that point, though, I didn't change anything. I wasn't ready to do a ketogenic diet. I wasn't actually ready to change anything in my lifestyle. And that's why it was a good trial, actually, because I changed nothing. I was still drinking a glass of wine, maybe 4 or 5 nights a week, I would have a glass of wine. I was still having old sugar. I eat well. So, if anything, maybe my only vice is a glass of wine. I do eat well, but still I hadn't changed anything. So I was really pleased with that. And I think then I decided that I would use the ketones to see, both in patients and myself, about weight loss. And I noted that I probably, for myself, had to do 2 ketones a day to see the weight loss going. That's what I noted for myself. I noted that I couldn't really shift that weight with 1 ketone a day. I could change my blood sugar, but I couldn't shift my weight. And so that's what I also noted that it was so much easier to stick to, because I think the thing that, and certainly this is reflected, I'll tell you a couple of stories in a minute, but I think the main thing that's reflected for menopausal patients, I've got plenty of women who are doing everything right. I mean, they are exercising, they're eating correctly, they don't touch any sugar. They may have the occasional glass of wine, but they certainly don't drink in any way excessively. And these women are not shifting anything. They'll come back to you 3-4 weeks later, and they're just so fed up with it. And it was so great to be able to offer them something where they could see, and not just that the weight was shifting, but also the weight was shifting in the right places. Because the problem with quite a few diets is that it goes off the places you want to keep the weight and not off that tummy area, which is that, you know, most of us have never had a tummy before, and suddenly the menopause hits, and all of a sudden we've got this thing around our waist, and it's like, what is that, you know? And to see the body shape change with the ketones, that was the exciting thing. And I think the other exciting thing from my point of view is I use metformin, which is, I mean, if you look at how ketones work, you know, the thing with ketones is what they do is they modify your insulin response. And what that means is that they actually, the problem in the menopause is the low estrogen will cause your serotonin levels to go down, but also cause you to have a more rapid insulin rise. So this insulin resistance kicks in. And so for every little tiny bit of sugar, you get more insulin released, which is a problem if you're trying to lose weight. And the great thing about the ketones is they really work on that insulin resistance. They make the body more sensitive to the insulin in the same way that metformin does. But, and I've used metformin for a long time for menopausal women for a whole variety of reasons. But what I found was that the ketones could either do the same effect on their own, or they could be additive to the metformin. So I had several women that had stabilized on the metformin. They were not going anywhere on the metformin. And I added the ketones in, and they were able to drop again. And that was just brilliant. And the other thing is for the people that didn't want to take a drug, because, you know, many of us don't want to do drugs. And to be able to take something that's natural and actually has a similar, if not more effect than metformin, was really exciting for patients. And so for me, those are the areas in the menopause that I particularly use it. I also use it for mood because, you know, a lot of women hit the menopause and they notice it can't be the energy, it can be the sleep, it can be, but it can be really the mood. And to have something come along and really kind of cheer you up from the inside out, because people would say to me, look, you know, there's no reason why I'm feeling like this. I've got a good life. There's nothing wrong with my life, but I just don't feel good in the morning anymore. You know, I feel low. I just, you know, can't be bothered with life. And to have something to sort of kickstart them, remind them of the women they were before the menopause, is really exciting, I think.
Yeah.
So
I think many women just lose who they are in the menopause, and that's you know, I've certainly seen that a lot. One of the things I wanted to jump onto as well when you were talking about foods is there's been a research paper in 2020 about the hormone ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone, is the higher it is in the body, the more likelihood women are to suffer from hot flushes. And there's been trials involved which actually show that ketones in particular the ester, but that's the pharmaceutical version, but still raised ketones, actually can drop and lower this hunger hormone so that you don't have that just incredible hunger surge, which again is a real problem if women then start to diet in conventional terms, as you say, because they think, well, why have I suddenly got a donut around my middle? But then they really struggle with the appetite control. So that's a really significant other benefit again of ketones in the diet. Another thing I just wanted to jump on, just in case people weren't aware, the reason why the taste is so sweet, which I think is really fascinating, is the esters, for example, aren't in any way manipulated, and everybody who's tasted the esters describes it as literally drinking jet engine fuel. And there's basically a titration sorry, you can tell my brain with ketones, I've also had a head fall, and it's really interesting. If I don't keep my ketones high enough, my brain doesn't work as well as it should do. So I do apologize, haven't had enough ketones today. But what they found is there's a titration point. So it's like diesel fuel, diesel fuel, diesel fuel, diesel fuel, while they're adding the two natural sweeteners. And then suddenly there's that tipping point where you lose the diesel engine and you go into the sweetness. But I think it's a very, very fine line, and that's wwhy they are quite a sweet taste, although I think they're trying to modify them as we go. But that, I think, is quite fascinating to know that, for this, because it is a big complaint, and people do worry that that sweet taste will spike their insulin, but actually it won't, because there are 4 natural sweeteners. We have monk fruit, we have xylitol, we have stevia, and we have erythritol. The latter 2 are the ones used in the ketone nat, which, as we know on this call, is the only bioidentical, naturally fermented, pure ketone molecule available.
Yeah.
Any other things you'd like to add?
Well, I think that those are the key things that I mean, I'm happy to, take any questions if anyone wants to ask any questions around that subject. But I think those are the areas that I've found it the most helpful. And I think it is that whole, for many women, some women have a lot of weight to lose in the menopause, but many don't have more than 3 or 4 kilos to lose. But it is those 3 or 4 kilos that really matter to them. And they really particularly matter where that weight is. And I think that is, and that is where it will help you reshape the body. So I've had some people actually didn't lose the weights that quickly, but in the process, and that's why whenever I'm putting someone on ketones, I also like them to do proper measurements, in fact, body measurements. Because, in fact, some women have not obvious, and that may be because, as we know, actually muscle weighs more than fat does. So it may be that they've had more energy to up their exercise, and they have actually gained muscle. But what they've noted is that actually their jeans look better on them, that the clothes that they couldn't get into before, they can now put on. And so actually, whenever I'm doing a sort of formalized program with people, I like them to do their measurements as well as their weight, because I think 2 things are very important.
In fact, Dustin said the other day, for those who are obsessed with the scale, but actually removing the scales, as he said to his wife, just smash the scales. Because, as he said, it's just such a stress response if you're trying so hard and then you don't see your weight changing. But weight, as you said, is muscle weight, is fat, and is fluid. And as many women attest to, fluid goes up and down. And also, what I feel is, this is an area I always talk to women about, aside of ketones, is that if you're having a food that your body doesn't like and you have an intolerance to it, you will gain fluid with that alone. So sometimes it's really good to do a bit of an elimination diet, and then you find the efficacy of the ketones massively increases when you remove the trigger that's actually slowing your body down and causing a form of inflammation. So it's almost like the ketone is dampening that fire instead of the ketone actually cracking on and doing the jobs it's best to do.
I think that, that's absolutely right. And I was just thinking, I had one other point I was going to make, but you carry on. I it's dropped out of my brain.
So I've been chatting away for hours here.
Oh, yes, anyway, it was. It was about intermittent fasting, because for a lot of people, they do quite well with not having breakfast. And I find that the ketones are a real adjunct in helping people to do that. That's what I find. People say, oh, but can I take a ketone? Yes, you can. And will it stop? In fact, very often you're not even thinking about food till the next
Absolutely.
lunchtime. That's what I find. It's not even on the mental radar of, you know, where's my breakfast? I've missed it. Or where's my snack mid-morning? No, I'm, you know, so busy with my increased energy, brain energy, that I'm actually not missing the meal. And I think that's another area where I've really found them to be useful.
And that's probably due to that nasty little ghrelin hormone being sort of knocked down a little bit. So we don't have those, don't have those cravings, which, but as I said, I think it's a great expression saying the lights come on, because that's, I think is a very powerful thing for women, because if the brain is working better and there is more hope and more positivity, you know, I've had women saying, not knowing too much about it and just being intrigued to try it, and saying, texting me going, I'm going into a really difficult job that I've managed for a few years. I am leaving soon, but I'm going into sort of the snake's den. But I feel really strong and really positive, yet nothing else has changed, but I'm drinking ketones. Is this to do with the ketones? And I said, yeah, it does change mood. Absolutely, it does.
I'm looking at a couple of questions here. Someone's asked about hot flashes. And I mean, the interesting thing about hot flashes is they're not so much about the actual level of hormones in the body. They're actually about the change in hormones. So one of the interesting, and in particular, things like alcohol, coffee, sugar, all of these things can actually precipitate a hot flush, because there's an intricate alignment with your blood sugar and with your insulin going up and down. So will they get rid of someone that's having 30 hot flushes a day? Probably not. But will they, with someone that's having the odd hot flush, or someone who's managing most of their hot flushes, but still is having a few breakthrough ones, there they can be very helpful, because if you are able to change your diet alongside it. So I think that's the point, because if you're taking a coffee or a glass of wine, you can probably expect to get a hot flush at some point along the way, unless you're on hormones. I mean, hormones will also ride you out, but you can expect to get a hot flush as a result of something like that, or a stressful situation. And there's no doubt that ketones, by leveling out your blood sugar and leveling out your insulin responses, will help in that process. So that's, someone else has asked, it is recommended to take them if you want to go into ketosis, or you want your blood ketones to rise, you do have to take them in 20 to 30 minutes. I have to say that I have often sipped them throughout the morning as somebody else.
I know, we talked about that, haven't we? Yeah. Well, I think it's just the latest is saying in an optimum space, it's drinking between 20 to 40 minutes, and then you will have that elevation in under the hour of to 0.5 millimole change in the blood.
But sometimes I've not done that, and I've still been able to get the benefits. You know, I've noted the brain benefits. I will sell. It may be that the actual benefits on the blood sugar, had I done it more rigorously every day, might have been even greater. That's what I would say. I think we'd be more likely to get a better response in terms of, I mean, I was happy with my response, but one can always do better. And I think they do help your mood, and I do think that you probably need more than one ketone a day.
Definitely, because they've got a 2 to 6 hour blood life in the body, for anybody who doesn't know that. And what I've seen is that the more repair that needs to take place in the body, the higher the level of repair, the more the body absorbs the ketones at a higher rate. So you are one who probably used them in a 2-hour period, whereas someone who's you know, quite in optimum health but is just wanting a bit more energy or sharper brain at certain times of the day, then I think what I've seen is those cases have a longer duration where the ketones are firing.
And I think that is important. Like, something I probably left out of my own personal story was that when I started taking the ketones last July, I had quite a lot of hip pain, one of my hips. I put it down to falling off a trampoline a few years previously, and it just started to really bother me, actually, to the extent that I thought I probably should get an MRI on this and, you know, have someone look at this. And I started taking the ketones and I started doing Pilates. And I have to say, I have not had any, and that hip pain had been there for 6 months. I'm not the type to run off for MRIs, the hint of a little bit of pain. It had been there for months. And I have to say, I've had no hip pain. And I would say it probably disappeared in the space of about 6 weeks. I can't be 100% certain, but it was certainly less than 3 months. So I think, and that is that whole business of repair that you're talking about. It is that, where have you got inflammation in the body? Where are the ketones going to connect in to help with that inflammation? That's how I see it.
And I think the important thing to add in there is we all know the benefits of exercise are essential, in particular going into the menopause. We do need to protect the heart with cardiovascular. We do need to consider weight training on the bone front. But if someone is exhausted and if someone is in pain, exercise is sort of out of the equation. But this is where, again, it's such an incredibly healing therapeutic tool, in my experience, because you do get people back moving again by treating some of the underlying issues that are going on.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Excellent. Any further questions? And if not, we'll wrap up. But it's been incredible speaking to you, Dr. Wendy. Thank you so much for at least jumping on and sharing your incredible knowledge. It'd be wonderful to have you on again, because, again, there's so many areas with hormones, with women who might be on who are not in perimenopause or menopause. But it would be wonderful to share more, and also about the whole blood sugar aspect, because I think that's a really critical area. We can talk a lot more about metabolic health and the significance of actually really looking to lower our blood sugar, all of us, in the future. And ketones are such an excellent tool to help you do that, whereas some find it impossible to do without the use of ketones.
I think that's right. I mean, certainly with, I use them with polycystic ovary patients. And at this time of COVID, where it's still lurking in the background, reducing our inflammatory levels is something we all need to be very aware of. There's no doubt in my mind at all that the two things we should all be focusing on is, one, making sure we've got adequate vitamin D levels, but the other is making sure that we keep our inflammatory levels down, because there's no doubt that the people that have had issues with COVID have all, for the most part, had inflammation issues. And that's, that's terribly important for all of us who are trying to look after ourselves.
No, absolutely. I totally concur with that, Dr. Wendy. Amazing. Thank you so much indeed, and thank you everybody for being on the call. So sorry, as usual, I'm on my phone and I can't see many of you or read the messages. I will get better at technology, I promise you, but thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Wendy. Bless you.
Thank you, everyone.